Alright, so we're going to talk about 9/11 today, and I just heard you guys spent a pretty good amount of time yesterday talking about it, which is good, so you should have a lot of background for what we're about to do. When you talk about 9/11, you can talk a lot about the human tragedy, of course, just the sheer number of lives lost, destruction of buildings, and those type of things. But for today's lesson, I want to talk a little bit about maybe what 9/11 is going to mean for history. So, you know, when you think about history, you go backwards, right? Sometimes as historians, we kind of look forward and we kind of imagine, well, what are people going to say about this in 50 years and 100 years and 200 years? And I'm going to make my case to you as far as what I think people are going to say about 9/11 into the future. So our essential question goes right along with that, and that's, how did 9/11 change America's view on terrorism? All right, you got some hands up. I'll take them. I'll take the questions down, and we should be able to answer this at the end. But go ahead. We'll start here.
How did it change our view on terrorism? It opened up our eyes of what could happen and what we need to do to prepare.
Okay. We upgraded our security tenfold with the airport system.
Good point.
Yeah, anyone who's traveled pre-9/11 and post-9/11 will tell you it's quite a bit different. We have to take off shoes and lots of things now.
Check back pockets.
Brandon, you got something?
I was gonna say that it made us realize like how bad it can be, and it can get worse. Because in the packet that we had read, it said that it was like the worst death for firefighters and stuff like that.
Correct.
So it was the worst.
When everyone was running out of the towers, what were the firefighters doing?
Going
in. So they lost a tremendous amount of firefighters in New York.
Yeah.
I'm going to go back just a little bit from 9/11. I'm going to show you a couple photos and talk about a couple incidents that occurred pre-9/11.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Can you still see?
Around in the Oscar, what they do that mean?
Not the clearest picture. This is the U.S. Embassy in Kenya. So in 1998, Al-Qaeda was able to pull off a simultaneous attack on 2 U.S. embassies, one in Kenya and one in Tanzania, killing many, many hundreds of people. You guys know what an embassy is?
No.
Isn't that like an outpost?
In the back. He
Yeah,
said
a little bit like
outpost.
that.
It's a place where you go to, like, look after your citizenship. Right?
Yeah, it's a little piece of your country in a foreign country. So
Like you can go there and get your like passport renewed and stuff like
yeah,
that.
if you lose it, or if you run into legal trouble, or
Yeah,
things
in a
like
different
that.
country.
So if you can't hit us here, it's kind of like a next best step for a terrorist. So they were able to do this coordinated attack. And just a short time after, about 2 years later, we saw another attack happen. This is the USS Cole. It was docked in Yemen,
What is docked?
kind of parked for a boat right along the shore, and this really small boat kind of just came up to the side of it. There were 2 individuals on board. They were waving to the crew, and as it turns out, the little tiny like fishing boat was packed with C4 explosives. Blew a big hole in the side of the ship, killed 17 sailors, injured 40 plus. The ship did not sink.
So they were suicide bombers, so they died as well.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So this is 2000.
Why do they hate America so much?
Political reasons. Religious.
It's complicated. We'll say religion has something to do with it. The creation of Israel was a big thing in 1947. Why was the state of Israel created? What happened just before 1947?
World War II.
World War II. So the Nazi Holocaust and the attempted genocide of the Jewish people led to the reestablishing of Israel, which was, the ancestral homeland of the Hebrew people. And when that happened, Israel's surrounded by Islamic neighbors, and they're kind of fighting over the Holy Land. Each religion, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, share really the same Holy Land. And I use the word share. It'd be nice if they could share it in another sense, but they can't, or they haven't been able to now. So the United States supports Israel. We're probably the best friend of Israel. They use our technology, our weapons, our planes, our tanks. They have nuclear weapons. And if we're friends with Israel and somebody doesn't like Israel, then we're naturally a target. And then of course we fought a few wars over in the Middle East. We've been involved in politics there for a number of years. So that's maybe why they wouldn't necessarily like the government so much, and then I guess in turn that turns to the people.
So they don't like us because we help out Israel?
That's
We're
one of
allies
the-
with Israel?
That's one of the reasons for sure.
Osama bin Laden worked for your government too.
Osama bin Laden, I don't think worked for our government. I think the bin Laden family had ties to our government through Saudi Arabia. That's undeniable. But I don't think Osama bin Laden was a U.S. operative in any way.
He was working for Persian Gulf War and stuff.
Yeah, Saudi Arabia, who's his homeland, and where his family is pretty affluent, was a big help to us in the first Gulf War.
They might make a big
We used their land for bases, etc.
another big terrorist attack.
All right, I'm gonna switch real quick as I start talking about something else, but I want to put some 9/11, actual 9/11 photos up here, just so you can kind of see them while we talk.
Yeah.
Probably seen a lot of these over the last couple days, but a couple that really stand out is just before impact with the second plane. Not a lot of people were watching when the first tower was hit. Of course, we didn't think anything was going to happen, but all eyes were on this when the second plane hit. So a lot of America watched this happen live, including myself.
No, they do have videos of the first tower getting hit.
He was there.
Yeah, there were a couple people that kind of accidentally caught it, were filming something else, heard the noise, or just, happened to be.
Yeah, they saw
filming
the
that
low
area.
flying plane. They knew the plane was flying too low.
Yeah. So, I'm gonna leave this up for a second and I'll scroll through some more, but I wanna, take a little step back, slide this over just a little bit, in history real quick. If I was gonna say what's America's first war, what would you guys say?
Revolution.
Revolutionary War, very good. So we're gonna say Revolutionary
Good job.
War. What's the next big one after that?
Civil
French
War.
American or French and Indian or
Mexican Civil.
something
The
like
War of 1812 or something like that.
They was-
We're gonna, all those are wars, but we're gonna go with the War of 1812. That's the next big one.
right.
What happened in the War of 1812?
Wasn't it Mexico? French. Wasn't it Mexico?
A little bit after this,
Oh.
like Mexico. The War of 1812.
I was just gonna ask, what war was it where it was like the British redcoats and all that stuff? What was
The
it?
Civil War?
That was called the Civil War?
Both of these, there's your hint for the second one. So the War of 1812 was kind of a revenge attack.
Also, like the British and the French. Yeah.
Yeah, the War of 1812 is most famous in America for the fact that the White House gets burned. Literally, people are grabbing stuff, like artifacts, and running out of the building as the British are approaching. And in those times, for whatever reason, when you left an area, they tended to burn it down. This happened to St. Augustine a couple times. The pirates or the British would come through, and everyone would leave, and they'd burn the city down. Kind of interesting tactic. So after that, we did have the stuff with Mexico. Call it kind of a minor war, relatively speaking. But we fought Mexico in the 1840s, and that's how we ended up with Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, parts of California. After that, you guys already said it, the big one is Civil War. So the Civil War in 1861 massive destruction, massive amounts of casualties. We had, Sherman's march through Georgia, and he burned along the way and destroyed along the way, in the British tradition, I guess. And the bloodiest war in our history by far. After that, really, you start
Gettysburg.
Gettysburg Battle, 1863. 1898 is really the next war after that. And that's the Spanish-American War. The interesting thing about the Spanish-American War is it was not fought in Spain or in America. Anybody know where it was fought?
Asia. Spanish.
Persian Gulf.
Britain.
Mexico.
Europe.
Middle East.
Think really close, but not America.
Canada.
Cuba.
Cuba. Very good. Cuba.
That was a
So the
guess.
Cuban people were revolting against the Spanish
Good guess.
Imperials. They wanted to form their own country. Spain was pretty big and bad. Cubans were having a little trouble. We end up getting involved. So we go down to Cuba. That's where Teddy Roosevelt rises to fame. He later become president. And we help the Cuban people kick Spain out. This is Spain's last entry into the New World ends. And we end up out of that war with Puerto Rico as a prize, I guess.
The teddy bear was made after Theodore Roosevelt because he didn't want to kill a little baby bear.
Teddy Roosevelt was a big naturalist and a big hunter. And really, true story, but responsible for our national parks.
He didn't want to kill a baby bear.
All right, so the big one after this happens in 1917. What war happened? in
World War
1917?
One.
World War I. Where's World War I fought?
Germany.
Vietnam.
French.
Vietnam.
A lot of World War I's fought in Europe. We end up doing a lot of fighting in France. We're fighting the Germans in France because the Germans invaded France. And
Wasn't there a lot of trenches?
Was it?
yes, the trench warfare started in World War I. You guys have a good amount of background knowledge on this. I'm going to have to say something nice to your social studies teacher.
I don't know anything.
See?
So World War I happens in Europe. World War I ends, doesn't, in retrospect, doesn't end exactly the way we may have wanted it to end. Because what happens right after World War I? We're not, World War II happens.
Yay.
So I'm going to put 1939, even though for us it didn't happen until 1941. So World War II breaks out. Now World War II is really much more of a world war, right?
Yeah.
It happens in Europe. Same spots as World War I, but it added a couple spots. North Africa,
Madagascar.
Asia, fighting with Japan.
Yep.
Um, the main thrust of the war, if you're going to say where were the two hottest battle points, they're going to be
Austria.
Germany, which Austria is basically connected to Germany, and then the islands in the Pacific.
Like the Philippines.
The Philippines, all of the islands between Hawaii and Japan, basically. The Philippines.
We live in Australia too.
Australia gets involved in World War II, and Australia, as you guys probably imagine, doesn't tend to get into a whole lot of these conflicts. They try to stay out of it. We finish off World War II, takes 6 years, 1945 it ends. Shortly thereafter, though, 1950s turn around,
Korean War.
right before Vietnam, Korea, so we got, look, Mark is dying here, Korea. U.S. is going to kick the communists out of Korea.
We lost.
My dad.
That's
We
the
didn't
only
kick the
one we
communists
lost.
out of Korea, right? Now, they didn't spread, they didn't take the whole Korea. We got a South Korea today. You guys know that because South Korea makes Samsung TVs and Kias and Hyundai cars.
I didn't know that.
Yes. So, we are going to call that kind of we'll call it a draw.
Mhm.
Vietnam happens, same thing, just a lot bloodier, a lot longer, more loss
So
of
we
life.
didn't win the war against Korea?
We could
We,
have, but
we stopped communism from spreading, but we didn't purge communism from Korea. We end up with two countries, a north and a south. It's kind of a compromise. Vietnam is the exact same scenario. We end up with two countries, a North Vietnam and a South Vietnam.
And that's how Kim Jong-un.
Didn't we
When
win
did-
Vietnam War?
No, we didn't.
Mm-mm.
This Vietnam started in '63.
It's to the
19
school ground.
official fighting in Vietnam started in '65.
It's awesome.
In '74.
So, if I was going to draw a line, let's say I'm going to draw a line right here.
Supposedly.
Yes, theoretically there's a line here. Above this line where's all this fighting taking place?
America.
Overseas.
America, right? It's happening here.
Oh.
Revolutionary War to Civil War. After that, Spanish American, World War I. We could put a little asterisk by World War II and say they did get us in Pearl Harbor. But that was the extent of fighting in U.S. cities. It was that, and then you don't have it. So then you get these type of pictures, this type of video.
Whoa.
That's when it's collapsing, right?
Yes.
Coming down.
It's a good picture.
So you guys, I think you guys already had a good take on this at the beginning. So if you were going to summarize that, you would say what?
Those three.
How did our view change?
We were kind of,
We don't like them.
yeah, we kind of built up some sort of hatred, not hatred, but I said we weren't very fond of porn.
That's why we shouldn't let George.
I would say,
Okay, so
We
you
felt like it couldn't happen to
I would
us.
say like it was, we was not used to it, put it like that, because during this age, like we didn't really see that type of stuff happen on our like land.
On our
I
soil.
like it.
Yeah, we weren't safe.
Boston Marvin.
Brandon, got you.
We weren't really like prepared for like the war, like on our own home turf, because like we have like experienced that for so long. So like they basically like hit us in our weak spot. And they came to our country and hit us in our weak spot. So like it just better prepared us for like future attacks that possibly can come to our country.
Yeah.
I say 9/11 changed our view on terrorism because it showed us how vulnerable we are. We didn't even see it coming.
I think y'all have a really good grasp of this, and that's really what I wanted to get across, and that's awesome. Most Americans just there's a saying that ignorance is bliss. Most Americans were blissfully ignorant to terrorism. There are many parts of the world this is a normal event. I know if you go to Israel, I mean they're just expect that they're going to have missiles lobbed over into their territory at times. But we just weren't, and the war finally came to us. And if you listen to President Bush, regardless of your political affiliations, President Bush said that after 9/11, that changed his whole outlook. He became basically, his number one and sole focus was keeping America from getting hit again, keeping America safe. So we kind of we had to take those rose-colored glasses off a little bit and actually kind of take this thing head on. And in my lifetime, just a little bit of insight for y'all, I've never seen the two political parties unite like they did after 9/11. So there, at least for a little while, and I don't remember, maybe a week, 2 weeks, maybe a month, there were no Democrats or Republicans. Everyone was really united. And it was kind of we're going to do whatever it takes to stop this. So of course we end up going to Afghanistan shortly after. Any other questions or comments?
What did we do in Afghanistan?
We went to Afghanistan to chase Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda. They were hiding there. There was a government there called the Taliban, and they were basically harboring him. They weren't going to give him up. So we said, in a very famous speech, George Bush said, you know, if you're not with us, you're against us. We will make no distinction between terrorists and those who harbor terrorists. And that led us into Afghanistan.
Yeah.
You showed them what?
Why would they hit these specific buildings?
Because they're working.
These were called the
Symbol.
World Trade Center.
Simple.
And inside these buildings were a tremendous amount of companies that dealt with money. So stocks, bonds, trading, antiquity trading, everything, banks.
So we could have
These were the tallest
we
buildings.
were going
in New
to a
York at the time.
depression.
Correct.
Cause that see how we would go to a depression if that get.
It definitely took a big toll on our monetary system. And if you imagine if all these places had insurance, the insurance companies had to absorb this, and we had a lot of government help, which of course government help means taxpayer help, which means it puts a burden on everything. And then of course the wars afterwards cost a lot as well. So this definitely And that just costs lives, it costs money. The Pentagon as well was hit, you know, that's a military target. And the fourth plane, United 93, that crashed.
In the Pennsylvania.
As it was circling back, I mean, it's either it was going towards the White House or the Capitol building. Though that would have been a sign of our money, a sign of our military, and a sign of our government if they would have been able to.
I have a question.
Might have been a third
Do you
World
think
War.
that they would have stopped that plane before it hit the White House? Would they shot it down, you think?
President Bush said that he was asked and he scrambled, he authorized jets to be scrambled to intercept that plane. And in his words, he said he did not know when he heard that plane crash if we had shot it down. So,
But he was in Florida.
yeah, but he authorized that plane to scramble because that fourth plane was a little bit delayed.
So on that day, I heard like he was at like a school, and then they came like he had to stop like
Yeah.
reading to the children. He was inside the plane like most
How you
of the
finished
day,
the book?
like moving.
Like reading to him, wasn't it?
Yeah, he was with some elementary students, and one of his
It's called ground
staff
zero.
members kind of runs up, whispers into his ear.
Yeah, we saw the video of that.
And Mr. President, we're under attack. This was apparently what he said. And
Didn't the president continue the book and finish the book with the children?
he stayed there for a few minutes afterwards. He caught some grief for that. And like he said, he ended up kind of being flown around and hidden. And he wanted to go to Washington, because he did an interview on this about 4 years ago. where
Wasn't
finally gave
wasn't
the
he
inside.
like just flying around Air Force One like the whole
Right.
night? So they,
That's
so
what
they
they
figured out
said.
they were
Yeah, they didn't want him in Washington, that's for sure.
Where's Air Force One?
Air Force One's a
Zero,
plane.
that's a plane.
Oh. Oh,
It's a big plane.
Mr. Stull, so,
and it's a place?
I heard that,
My shoes.
yo, I'm trying to, I heard that, President Bush is the one
Wait,
who
wait,
did
wait a minute,
9/11.
There's a tremendous amount of conspiracy theories that hover around 9/11. You guys are going to be very susceptible to these because of your age.
Yeah.
Just the fact that you weren't really there, so it's easier to kind of, if you're controlling the information you get. I've never seen a credible link to President Bush. The one thing with the conspiracy theory, I always tell my students is, conspiracy theories work really good when you don't have anyone claiming they did it. So, John F. Kennedy, for example, the guy who assassinates John F. Kennedy gets assassinated immediately. That's a good conspiracy theory. You could say, okay, why didn't they want them to talk? That's a good one. That's one that needs to be analyzed and things like that. But 9/11, you know, Al-Qaeda said they did it. So basically, to have a conspiracy theory with George Bush, you would have to say George Bush worked with Al-Qaeda to pull this off, and I just don't
believe
see
he
it.
did. Wasn't he Muslim?
I see it.
George Bush is never heard George Bush characterized as a Muslim. I think people try to claim that President Obama is a Muslim because his father was Muslim, but President Obama is Christian by his own admission.
Oh.
And even then, you know, hundreds of Muslims died on 9/11.
I feel like
in
we
the
should
buildings.
execute George Bush.
They don't care about that
We had a 9/11 commission that looked into this, and their conclusion basically was, we had a lot of evidence and a lot of information about things that were occurring pre-9/11, but the different agencies weren't talking to each other. And so that's when the Department of Homeland Security was created to coordinate. If the FBI knows one thing and the CIA knows another, we need them at some level to be talking, because maybe it kind of is iffy and theirs is iffy, but when you put it together, it's, wow, there's something happening.
There's one thing that kind of sketches me out.